Let's welcome our next panel, Switzerland, a global life sciences hub in the heart of Europe, featuring Ulf Rauender, Chief Executive Officer for NBE Therapeutics, Chandra Leo, Investment Advisor, HVM Partners, Chris Martin, Chief Executive Officer, Co-Founder and Director, ADC Therapeutics, Alex Mayweg, Managing Director, Versant Ventures, Jordi Montserrat, Co-Founder and Managing Partner, Venturelab. And our session leader is Michael Althofer, Chief Executive Officer, Swiss Biotech Association.
Well, I'll welcome you to the Swiss Innovation Panel embedded in the WuXi Global Healthcare Forum 2021. My name is Michael Althofer and I'm the CEO of the Swiss Biotech Association. Under the title, A Global Life Science Hub in the Heart of Europe, we would like to offer you some insight into the key success factors of the Swiss Pharma and Biotech Hub and highlight the opportunities Switzerland has to offer for international talents, business partners, entrepreneurs, and investors alike. We will outline in which way Switzerland is unique and different in delivering scientific innovation and in supporting international collaborations, which aim at providing solutions to the medical needs of patients around the globe. The Swiss Biotech Hub comprises more than 1,000 biotech companies, and year-on-year venture capitalists invest more than $1.5 billion into this external innovation hub. Together with world-leading universities and hospitals, multinational pharma companies and specialized manufacturers, they form a global life science ecosystem that contributes more than 40% of the Swiss export value and has become an important source of therapeutic solutions for the world healthcare market. We trust that our discussion will shed some light on why these organizations and businesses choose Switzerland as their home base and how they collaborate with their research and business partners in all regions of the world to successfully address the current and emerging medical needs. We have assembled panelists that look at the Swiss Life Science Hub from different perspectives, while sharing their enthusiasm for the power of innovation, the excellent framework conditions, and the international connectivity Switzerland offers in support of developing therapeutic solutions. The panel includes two investors, Alexander Mayweg from Versant Ventures and Chandra Leo from HVM Partners, as well as two CEOs and co-founders of biotech companies, Chris Martin from ADC Therapeutics and Ulf Rauender from NBE Therapeutics. And last but not least, Jordi Montserrat, who represents Venturelab, an organization that has become an essential part of the vibrant Swiss biotech startup scene, supporting emerging biotech companies and helping them to be successful and effective from the start. I'll now kindly ask all panelists to briefly introduce themselves and to share with you their motivation and enthusiasm for the Swiss Biotech Hub and our common objective to develop new therapies for patients around the globe. Let's start with Jordi, as you are focusing on supporting emerging companies from the very beginning.
Thank you very much, Michael. So it's a pleasure to be here. Yes, I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Venturelab. Our organization is actually focused on discovering these talents. And I think at the heart of emerging companies, we have the entrepreneurs. So the way it works, and we have the chance in Switzerland to benefit from an environment that is very well connected between universities, academics, universities, also university hospitals, research institutions, as well as the partners, the industrial partners. And that's where we actually tap the starting, what I call foundation of any company, which are the entrepreneurs and the science, of course, which will be used as material to create those companies. Then in this ecosystem, we can benefit from several tools that are being here, that have been set up to help those companies and those entrepreneurs do the first step, ideally in the most professional way. By tools, I mean funding. We find funding directly in the universities. We find funding external, making the links with investors, such as an initiative, VentureKick, which I have also the pleasure to manage. And with these different tools, we basically enable and empower the entrepreneurs at the start, also very often with training when they need it. Sometimes they come with the experience, sometimes with less experience when we have PhDs and people like these who are coming out of universities. We empower them to set the foundation of their startup and to access experience, experts, people in the industry, as well, of course, as entrepreneurs, as investors, which is a key part of the steps necessary to develop the companies. So I'll stop here, but that's just really the basic material, what we do, enabling, structuring. And the ambition, of course, is very early on to give them a professional structure and the maximum proper exposure to the right people in the network. And I think for this, Switzerland is really offers an environment that is very rich, very diverse, very dense, with the expertise in the biotech, in the healthcare globally. Also, I often put biotech and medtech, together with this expertise. We can illustrate later with some example, but that's really the environment that we use to have those emerging companies flourish.
Thank you, Jordi. I'd like to move to Alexander, because you are sort of combining setting up new emerging companies and, of course, securing the funding of them.
Yeah, hi. Good to see you guys all in 2 dimensions, and look forward to seeing you in 3D soon. Alex Maivik, Managing Director at Versant Ventures here in Basel. I run the investment office here and also our discovery engine, which is very in-depth involved in company creation. I've been with the firm for the last 5 years and really enjoyed that. Before that, I was a drug discoverer at Roche for 14 years. So I've always been fascinated of building teams and research for addressing medical need and bringing molecules into the clinic for patients. And I've been delighted to have been able to do that here for Roche and now more recently in company creation with Versant and building companies. I think the geography is pretty special, as I'm sure we'll discuss. You have this blend of entrepreneurial scientists that have really, decades of experience of taking molecules into the clinic. And I think we're seeing here really a nice buildup of biotech ecosystems together next to the, some of the leading pharma companies in the world. So it's been pretty special and enormous fun to be active in this sector. So great to see you all, and look forward to chatting more.
Thank you, Alex. And moving on to Chandra, as he's the second investor on the panel, equally to Versant Venture, HVM Partners is also active globally.
Yes, and thank you for the invitation. So my name is Chandra Leo. I'm a member of the private equity team at HVM Partners. I'm a medical doctor by training and have studied and worked in Germany, the US, the UK, France, and Singapore before moving to Switzerland 13 years ago. And I'm happy to announce that I recently became a Swiss citizen. I'm, as mentioned, a member of the private equity team here. We're at HVM, a Swiss healthcare firm that was founded in 2001, 20 years ago. And we currently have more than $2.5 billion in assets under management. Most of it is in HVM Healthcare Investments, an Evergreen fund that is listed on the Swiss Stock Exchange. And as HVM, we invest mainly in biotech pharma, but also in diagnostics, medical devices, and digital health across Switzerland and Europe, but also around the world, in North America, Israel, and Asia, specifically in India and China. Looking forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you, Chandra. I'm moving to Chris, as Chris is one of the 2 co-founders and CEOs of a biotech company in Switzerland, ADC Therapeutics. Just a quick word for introduction to you.
Thank you, Michael. I mean, I've been working in the field of drug discovery and development for over 25 years, and I think, like everybody, I've been touched with family members with cancer, and have seen over the many years in the industry the impact that new targeted therapies with superior tolerability profiles and effectiveness can have to bring hope to patients, their families, and to the physicians treating them. So I feel very privileged to be working in an industry which has really got a very singular focus, a focus on the patients. You get up every day. It's you know what you're doing. It attracts like-minded people as colleagues and collaborators, which makes it an exciting and stimulating environment to work with usually highly intelligent, highly educated people that you're working with and interacting with. So, yeah, I'm very, very privileged to be working in this sector. It's a great fun to do. It's stimulating and rewarding, but it's also tough. Cancer is a tough challenge. It takes many years to be successful at it. Listening to some of the other speakers here, I was quickly counting up. I've worked over the years in 5 continents, and at the end of the day, I'm finding myself settled here in Switzerland, and it's a wonderful environment to live in, to work in. It's got superb education, superb infrastructure, and then when you've got all the risks of something like drug discovery and development, having that stability and quality of environment really is enabling. So very much looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Chris. And I'm sure we all share this engagement and this ambition to help solving medical needs around the world. Ulf, to close the panel introduction, now equally you have started not just one, but several companies, and maybe you give us a quick look into your motivation and your background.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And like the previous speakers, I have to say it's a pleasure to be part of that panel. Like the previous speakers, I can also mention that I've been very much in a global environment doing research, and actually research brought me to Switzerland many years ago for my PhD thesis at the Basel Institute for Immunology. And while I have been doing additional research in the United States in between, since 18 years, I'm now in the business of building biotech companies, and I chose Switzerland, and in particular the region here, Basel, with 2 of the largest pharma companies in the world being located in this region, because it's a fantastic environment where you have a mix of experienced drug developers, but also a very good network of high-profile and very top-notch academic institutions, where I had the pleasure to be part of that many years ago. So for me, it was a natural decision to build my companies in Switzerland. So currently, I'm the CEO of NBE Therapeutics, which is active also in the area of oncology, like Chris's company, and actually even in the area of antibody-drug conjugates. And as many of them in the audience may know, the company was recently acquired by Boehringer Ingelheim. But the unit of NBE Therapeutics, now 100% daughter of Boehringer Ingelheim, will continue to operate as an independent Swiss startup company with the same personnel and with the same energy and commitment in order to develop drugs for the benefit of cancer patients. Before that, and I started the company 8 years ago, I actually founded a company called 4Antibody, which was an antibody discovery platform company also here in Basel in Switzerland, and that company was sold to US-based Agenos, where now some of the products that we developed early on are now in clinical development, and I think one is even at the brink to commercialization. So it's a pleasure to be here and to explain a little bit more what are the benefits and also the the highlights of being part of a Swiss biotech ecosystem or biopharmaceutical ecosystem. And I think we will go into these details a little bit later in this session.
Thank you, Ulf. So I'm sure the viewers can see that this panel can look at the Swiss Life Science Hub from many different perspectives. And when we discussed in preparation of this panel which topics we could address today and which elements may be characteristics for the Swiss Life Science Hub, we did not just rely on our own perspective, but also on the feedback from many business partners. One element that certainly sticks out immediately is the fact that Switzerland has long and deep roots in science-based innovation in general, and in pharma and biotech in particular, including strong contributions to basic research, industrial applications, and a commitment to invest in science-based education and infrastructure. If I just take a couple of examples to get started, the Federal Institute of Technology, for example, one of Switzerland's world-leading universities, was founded back in 1855. Ciba, Sandoz, and Roche were also founded in the 19th century, and they developed into pharma companies more than a century ago. Switzerland had also been a pioneer in biotech. For example, last year we had the privilege to provide the Swiss Biotech Success Story Award to Werner Arber for his groundbreaking work in molecular biology more than 60 years ago. Werner Arber is one of Switzerland's 28 Nobel Prize laureates. At the age of 91, he is a living testimony to these deep roots of Switzerland in life science innovation and an inspiration to all scientists and entrepreneurs in this field still today. He had led the groundwork for pioneering biotech companies such as Biogen, which was founded in Geneva some 50 years ago. The long history in life science innovation also led to a strong tradition for Swiss scientists to protect their new ideas with patent applications. For a country with limited natural resources, this has proven to be an important way to protect its innovation. The strong patent portfolio is only one of the concrete benefits of the long history in life science research, but there are many other tangible benefits in today's Swiss life science industry that have built over decades and have their roots in key events back in the last century. Alex, you have mentioned that you worked at Roche prior to your engagement with Versant Ventures, and certainly in the build-up of that multinational company, you have come across many of these elements that have actually been seeing their groundwork laid back in the last century, be it in the context of immunology research or the collaboration, for example, between Roche and Genentech. Can you maybe refer a little bit to that world and show us in what context you can see that these deep roots in the long history have big implications still today?
Yeah, happy to. And I think when you were talking about the patents per capita and Nobel Prizes, and I do remember a chart once that correlated that with chocolate consumption, which I think is also characteristic here. But I was always fascinated when I was at Roche to see that it was a company that very early on recognized the breadth of potential drug types. I think, obviously having its history firmly in small molecules, which of course is a wonderful modality and extremely powerful. Already in the 90s, Roche recognized that other forms of molecules could become drugs, namely monoclonal antibodies, and of course, other various formats and mixed formats after that. And I think it was, again, when I read or looked into the background to this, it was, the sort of Roche Institute of Immunology and many of those foundations that were laid long ago, but really had this there are the seeds that are sown, which have long-term impact, right? And I think we're seeing that impact still today, where probably, Roche was one of the first pharmas to enter into monoclonal antibodies and adopt that as a new modality, and really in some ways launched biotech per se. Right, because before that, I think biotech didn't really exist in that form, and others followed, and of course it came with that then many new advances, and in ADCs, as we touched upon already. So I think that's really profound here, and maybe a more recent example is that some of the early research into TCR and T cell recognition were also carried out already quite a number of years ago here, which recently led us to found a company in cell therapy here, which is also increasingly strengthening its sort of profile in this area, a little bit behind perhaps some of the others, but Novartis is of course also here a leader in the field, and so it's a similar repeat of this phenomenon, Michael.
Well, thank you, Alex. I know we would have many more examples where the long history in life science innovation is not only characteristic for Switzerland, but has led to tangible results and robust research capacity that we can benefit from today. But I'd like to move on to a second element. When we ask our business partners how they view the Swiss Life Science Hub, there is always this element that they emphasize. They note a work attitude and a mindset that fosters high quality and well-organized collaborations. Collaborations within which also complex and long-term projects can be managed effectively. Typically, they say Swiss partners are seen as honest and reliable, fair and unbiased, and certainly eager to engage in international cooperation. Together, the cultural attitude and the formal regulatory framework provide for an attractive mix that attract many partners to work with Swiss counterparts or even to choose Switzerland as their home base. Its lack of natural resources and small local market inspired the development of products and solutions that help address global market needs. Maybe I can share an interesting statement of a managing director of an international pharma company that has its international headquarters in Switzerland. He mentioned to me once that it's actually an advantage that Switzerland is such a small country. He says, my team never run the risk that they would be distracted by the local market opportunity, but rather they could fully focus on using Switzerland as the platform for its international commercial operations. I know all the panelists can speak to this cultural attitude and to the openness of Swiss companies to collaborate internationally. I would like to give the opportunity to talk to Chris and Ulf to how they've been able to use the strengths of Switzerland and in what way Switzerland has actually helped them to process the buildup of ADC and NBE therapeutics. Maybe this time we switch it. Let's start with Ulf first.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. No, you're absolutely right in your introduction. I mean, due to the small size of Switzerland, we always have to look beyond the border and have to engage in international collaboration, not only for the purpose of finding market opportunities outside of Switzerland, but also for looking for talents outside of Switzerland. And I think Switzerland has always been very accommodating for talent that comes from abroad. And I'm one example of that because originally I'm from Germany, which is sometimes referred to as the big canton in Switzerland. I mean, the excellent science and an international environment at the Basel Institute for Immunology brought me to Switzerland in the first place. And this is one example where I can speak out of own experience. It was an extremely international institute where we had researchers from across the globe. I mean, from North America, from, of course, all European countries, from Asian countries especially. There was a very strong Japanese fraction at the Basel Institute for Immunology, and that I'm pretty sure is a blueprint for other high-profile institutions, academic institutions in Switzerland, where I think there's a very high cultural diversity already in academia. And that has actually translated very much, at least according to my personal experience, also into the biotech and biopharmaceutical environment. At least in my two companies, I can say that we always had at least 10 different nationalities with maybe 20, 30 employees. And so in that sense, I mean, we always have been able to maintain a great cultural diversity in our academic research, but also in the activities at the companies. And we always took kind of the qualification, the talent as the highest priority. And this, international collaborative environment, I think, is part of the success of many of the, let's say, academic and also commercial research activities that is taking place here in Switzerland. Together with the other factors that you have mentioned, I mean, there's a good legal system where you can build companies, a good framework for building companies. And then having also large corporations, of course, and internationally renowned and active corporations that attract additional international talent. So I think this is part of the success, the international collaboration, the cultural diversity that we have here in the country, and which is, where, I mean, the environment is accommodating for these, for such a setup. Maybe with this I close and lead over to Chris to add comments that I might have forgotten.
Thank you, Ulf. I'm a kind of serial entrepreneur, and we span ADC Therapeutics out of my previous company, which was Spirogen, which was subsequently sold to AstraZeneca. And when we span ADCT out, we thought, where should we put it? We knew we already had a number of kind of key points. We had a manufacturing collaboration in San Francisco. We had R&D laboratories in London. Originally, the technology was a spin out from University College London. So we knew we wanted to be a very international company to start with. And Switzerland really seemed like the ideal place. I've already talked about the need for a stable environment, a high quality environment, access, as Ulf has talked to world-class academic institutions and world-class service providers. And all of that exists here in Switzerland. So we formed ADC Therapeutics here back in late 2011. I remember kicking the company's kind of first strategy day off in Geneva. It's an excellent place to have as a headquarters, as a hub for a business which is international in terms of its own staff, but also much more international in terms of the collaborations we have with manufacturing, research, and medical partners. So I really find it hard to fault Switzerland as the ideal place to have that kind of base for companies that are right in the days of formation, but also growing, the ability to attract high quality talent here, and to grow the company. We're now a New York Stock Exchange listed company, and plan to carry on rapidly growing over the years. But I don't see us moving away from Switzerland. It provides everything we need.
Well, thank you, Chris and Ulf. And naturally, you have already touched upon many other elements that are characteristic and reflect the strengths of the Swiss life science hub. Not just a long life science history and the special culture here, but Switzerland has also developed one of the densest, most diversified and comprehensive life science ecosystems of the world. I mentioned it already in the introduction. More than 1,000 biotech SMEs and hundreds of medtech companies are based in Switzerland. Many leading multinational pharma companies either are based here or have their international headquarters here. Manufacturer, top universities and research institutes, well-known foundations in the healthcare sector, and even the multinational bodies such as the WHO, the WTO, WIPO, and the UN are based in Switzerland. This is all condensated into less than 15,000 square kilometers. Truly pushing for close proximity. The life science industry has created more than 300,000 high-value jobs, almost all of which are engaged in some sort of international collaboration. So this close proximity and a dense and diverse ecosystem provides for many advantages, and I truly believe is special in comparison to other locations. And I would like to ask the panelists to share some concrete practical examples. I know all of you could talk to this subject, but I would love to start with Jordi to illustrate how this proximity and diversity can actually help setting up new and emerging biotech companies.
Yes, with great pleasure. And actually, in Switzerland, we can start already with the simple fact that the supports for what we call competitive funding, when you want to go for funding for research and for developing companies, actually supports this partnership by forcing the creation of a partnership between a private entity and a public entity. And then the government will fund the research, but the results of this research will be transferred to the private company. And today, in several cases, actually, the funding goes towards the creation of companies. So this funding will support professors, researchers, PhDs typically, and to link to this diversity, I think Ulf alluded to this, already in this population, we have 60 to 70% of actually international PhDs, which are welcomed in the universities, which then become the company creators, the entrepreneurs. And I think very often we talk the different locations of Switzerland, but we have to remind that the strengths also come that in 2 hours train, you can go to any place. So Basel is an hour from Zurich, who is 2 hours from Lausanne, who is half an hour from Geneva. And all of these locations actually have also very strong hub, not to mention the BioCentrum area, you know, in the Schlieren area in Zurich, which has also several international companies and centers. You have this amazing mix of researchers, professors, entrepreneurs, and people from the industry. And so this mix and this proximity and this closeness actually strengthen what is also part of the culture. So all of these together, I think, really encourages the diversity, but also the proximity, the connectivity, almost forces, if I may say, but for the good of what we're looking for, these results.
Well, Michael, if I may chime in here for a second, because
Absolutely.
I think I could add a personal comment here. I don't go into all the details, but well, I was involved in that type of research, and as I said, very international research environment. But well, all of a sudden, when I mean, the kind of this infrastructure was there that Jordi contributed to build, well, how academic research could potentially be translated into research that could help patients and could be used to develop drugs. I mean, that was a fantastic eye-opener for me. And so, yeah, 18 years later, I'm here with a kind of 19 years of building biotech companies. And it would not have happened without that kind of network, this support. And then building these bridges between academia and biomedical research in a more corporate environment. So I just want to mention that, I mean, I think I'm a real life example of that, what you alluded to, Jordi, and wanted to add this personal note.
I think we've also seen changes over the last 10 years. I think, you know, it's, you know, all the you know, fundamentals are certainly there. I did feel that because, you know, big pharma was so prominent in Switzerland, you know, biotech was, you know, growing and always there, but in a, you know, sort of in a different version, perhaps in a different type of ecosystem than we know we might have seen or in the Bay Area or in Boston. I do think that, you know, over the last couple of years now, we've seen, you know, bigger investments take place here, more experienced management teams, but still, even, you know, we've been operating here for more than 10 years, and we've seen that some of our companies that we've invested in, you know, we had to look internationally to build management teams. And I think that's starting to change, you know, and maybe I can just give an illustration of how we've navigated that. You know, we've founded companies like CRISPR Therapeutics, and I think, you know, some of those companies, you know, are obviously still Swiss with an international presence. You know, and now what we're looking at is seeing that some of these experiences are starting to recycle and to pay off into the ecosystem. You know, maybe 10 years ago you had, you know, entrepreneurs, everyone was a first timer, right? 5 years ago, still, you know, you take people out of from pharma or from biotech, you know, let's build a company. It's easy to say, to deliver the end result is an adventure, as we all know. So I think that's been an evolution, and one way we've addressed that is we've built a discovery engine here next to our investment practice that is able to hire some of the, you know, most experienced talent, but they're not jumping into a, you know, 2 million seeded startup company, knowing that they have a 6-month notice period. By the time they might show up for their first day, you know, out of the 2 million, 1 million is left, and there's not a lot of runway, right? And so it was a way for us to get, you know, people comfortable to get into biotech because they had that entrepreneurial desire, but they knew they were jumping into a, you know, a strong venture fund, a leading venture fund that is creating multiple companies in parallel. And so that's been very useful for us. We liken our discovery engine, which we called Ridgeline here, for good reason, not just because of the Swiss Alps, but because we liken it as maybe a Swiss mountaineering school, right? We've been there to the summit. We understand how to get there. We can point out the hazards and some of the views, but in the end, we can take entrepreneurs and some of them that are doing this the first time and make sure that there's no footfalls and that ultimately we're going to get there. And I think now, you know, there are more and more, you know, senior management in biotech and other entrepreneurs and and staff in biotechs that have done it before. They have taken projects from early concept stage out of university, but they've gone all the way, right? They've taken them into the clinic, they've taken them through value inflection points, they've taken them through acquisitions or IPOs. And I think that recycling now is what we're seeing, which I think is really exciting. But it wasn't always like that, and I think this geography had to get there.
Indeed, it's been a strong and remarkable journey. Maybe give the chance to Chandra, because I know you have a slightly different approach, and still you're benefiting and taking advantage equally from the diversity of the Swiss Biotech Hub and Life Science Hub, and also you're building bridges on an international basis. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit how you can take best advantage of the Swiss ecosystem?
Sure. No, and I mean, I think we can't overestimate the impact that Versant's presence has had here in Basel in really sort of bringing additional innovation and entrepreneurship to the Swiss ecosystem. HVM is positioned as a somewhat later or medium later stage investor in many cases. And so we're, I think, part of that sort of chain of investment, because ultimately you need the early stage, the seed investors, you need in some cases family offices, business angels, but you also need the later stage investors and ultimately the public investors, everybody working together to make this work. I think from the HVM perspective, our specific positioning is that while most of our team is based here in Switzerland, we have always been active very internationally. And so we can also help to build bridges both into Switzerland for our portfolio companies in the US or in Asia, where we're usually the only European investor in those syndicates, but also the other way around, helping to bring Swiss and European companies to other parts of the world, both in terms of business development and strategic partnerships, but also in terms of their next financial steps, and companies from our portfolio like Opsiva or ITOS, Advanced Accelerator Applications, YMAPS, they're all European companies where we were one of the early European investors, but then helped them to access US funding and then ultimately list on the NASDAQ stock exchange, which is not the only way for companies to develop, but in many cases it's still a path that biotech companies pursue.
Thank you. I'd like to close this round or the focus on the diversity of the ecosystem with Chris, because you mentioned next to the close collaboration between academic and industrial partners and the technology transfer from them. In the buildup of ADC therapeutics, you also rely on other partners in the ecosphere, such as the manufacturer, high quality analytics, etc. Maybe you can just wrap up the other partners that are important as well when you think about building a global biotech company.
Certainly, Michael, and I think we've already talked about the starting off with small molecules, moving on to antibodies, biologics. There's now cell therapies, moving on to regenerative medicine, tissue engineering. So it's a very rapidly moving field and expansion in terms of modalities. And I think for startups, back in the day of small molecule companies where I started in Spirogen, you always knew that you'd be able to manufacture the small molecules once you'd conquered the underlying chemistry. But as you move into something as complicated as an antibody drug conjugate, where you're engineering the protein to make site-specific conjugations, you're looking at different epitopes, maybe different scaffolds even, you really need manufacturing partners who can work with you all the way from first in man through to commercial launch. So I think, going back to Geordie's situation, I work in the UK with Oxford University spin-outs, and I see there now that a lot of the challenges that they bump into these very complex manufacturing issues much earlier in the life of the company than used to be the case 10, 15 years ago. And having these sophisticated manufacturing players that are willing to engage with companies and to work with them through the development of their programs, as I say, through preclinical into the clinic and ultimately to the marketplace, is an enormous strength. It's very difficult to be at the leading edge of biotech without that these days. But then going beyond that, you know, all of the other infrastructure you need in terms of intellectual property management, international legal work, international accounting work across different accounting standards. Because Switzerland's a small country with a lot of multinational companies here, you have very experienced professional people, multilingual, happy to work across these different regulatory regimes on your doorstep. And again, that makes growing an international company in Switzerland much more easy than it is if you're actually embedded in a large company, which is very centered on the regulatory and the environment of its own country, but has less experience and credibility on the broader international scene. So I think that again is a great strength of the Swiss environment.
So there's one element missing that we didn't touch upon, or some of you have mentioned it, but the diversity actually goes further and it includes the talents. I know you could all speak to the diversity of talents in Switzerland and the international corporation. When I look at the screen here, there's one diversity that is missing. I see males only, but I know that our landscape looks significantly different. Who wants to speak to the diversity topic when it comes to building companies? I see Jordi naturally. Why don't you go first?
I am coming in, and I think it's definitely an important point, and we're not representative really of what's happening in this field. Let me give you, I think, a very talkative example, which is this year. So every year, since 10 years, we're publishing the top 100 Swiss startups, which is a ranking, but most important is we are putting the spotlight on 100 entrepreneurs, which are selected mostly by investors and experts of the scene, and showing, you know, the wealth and diversity of startup. And this year, for its 10th edition, the company who got the first rank is a company called Qiming, and Qiming has a female CEO and founder. That was the first time, but I thought it wasn't just one example. It really showed the number. And if I look, I could mention Volumina, who also has a female CEO. Very early on, we asked questions about, so how are you surrounding yourself? How are you composing your team? And definitely, of course, we can mention women, not only one. I recommend get the ranking. You will see in these years, we even had 2 women CEOs in the top 3. Was the first time, but it was the common and the current long evolution that we've seen now really bringing to fruition these results. So for this, I can really testify, we're not yet there, going in the right direction.
This was a testimony for the gender diversity. I know we could also have a long discussion about national diversity. I'd like to move on to looking into the future. We spoke about the current strengths of the Swiss life ecosystem, but of course, Switzerland also tries to prepare for the future. Switzerland as a country and Swiss-based life science companies continue to invest heavily in science-based education, in building up research and manufacturing capacity, and to further expand its vibrant startup scene. By doing so, it is of course important to understand the trends, emerging technologies, new tools and modalities that become available that can be applied when we try to develop more potent, more targeted, and maybe more therapies faster. I'd like to take the opportunity to ask the panelists to share their assessment as to which trends are important and how new therapeutic options will look like and how the process may change in the way we develop new drugs and new therapeutic options. I'd like to start with Chris, because you have a clear focus on the oncology side.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I think, you know, when I started working in oncology, there was this kind of distant dream that you'd be able to have what was referred to as personalized medicine. And it seemed like it was, you know, way off on the horizon. But now that is coming much more close and real, and it's making an enormous difference to patients already. But that does involve the ability to diagnose the disease at the molecular level, to identify much more precisely the disease that the patient has, and to match a targeted therapy to that disease and sequence that as the disease evolves through its treatment. And that requires bringing together diagnostics, artificial intelligence, deep sequencing. We work with Sophia Genetics, for example, right on our doorstep here in Lausanne, but a world-class resource in that area. The ability to develop biomarkers and take them through the regulatory process as companion diagnostics alongside drugs. And Switzerland, with its background in medtech, artificial intelligence, tech, as well as biotech, allows you to work down this stream of developing personalized targeted therapies and the whole service package that goes around that. And I think Switzerland's hospitals too are at the forefront of adopting this approach, and some of the physicians here are really working in multidisciplinary groups to bring together the diagnostics, the biomarkers, the targeted therapies, the clinical trials, to deliver these benefits to patients really at the leading edge on a global basis. So it's a very stimulating environment to be developing in this direction, and I think we're just at the beginning of being able to deliver these patient benefits to patients globally. And it's going to be a very exciting decade as we roll this out now.
Chandra, you are looking at women's health specifically, and also through your Evergreen fund, you try to support the funding of biotech companies also in other areas, and to get a bit away from the cyclicity of the funding round after funding round approach.
Yes, I mean, our main fund, HVM Healthcare Investments, is an evergreen fund. So as you know, most venture capital funds need to not only invest in companies, but then also try and sell their shares within 5 to 10 years of the initial investment. The evergreen fund structure gives us more flexibility to take on a longer term perspective. In addition to the venture team, which I'm a part of, we also have a public equity team under the same roof, so we can actually stay invested in our portfolio companies way after an IPO until these companies reach important additional value inflection points, and that's clearly a benefit both for the entrepreneurs but also for our investors. And I think right now it seems difficult to imagine a world where it's super hard to raise additional venture funds, or where it's very difficult to do IPOs. But I think all of us have been there before, and we may sooner or later head into that environment again. And so I think having evergreen funds provides an additional sort of factor of stability for the companies that are funded in this way.
Alexander, you mentioned that going forward, Switzerland may play an important role between Asia and the US, and of course I would also be interested in general how you see the trends and what are the most important elements you see changing.
Yeah, I think certainly, you know, I would say the big pharmas here are already covering many of the disease areas I think that are important. Of course, not all. I think when it comes to novel modalities and drug types, I think biotechs play absolutely key roles in innovating there. But even in some of the classical modalities, you know, like in protein degradation, particularly molecular glues, right? The understanding of how, rather than keeping proteins apart, how can we get two proteins on a date, right? How do we take small molecules and get two proteins together that don't have classical small molecule active sites? I think that's really a huge new wave that is emerging, and I think we're seeing, you know, also here in Switzerland, key advances in that. I think precision oncology is fundamental, and the question is how can we combine, you know, these drivers, cancer drivers and mutations as groups, right? So what we're really looking for is broader spectrum precision oncology therapies, and I think cell therapy is an angle to do that. And maybe an interesting, you know, one I'm personally engaged in right now is a discovery coming out of Basel in cell therapy, where we can selectively target cancer versus healthy cells. And we also can target different cancers as a group through shared antigens and have no further immune restriction. And so that could really open the door to new advances in such areas. When it comes to the sort of geographical positioning, and it ties into what we've discussed around talent, I would say that Switzerland is now thinking broader in terms of international teams, right? We have a perfect time zone. We can work with Asia and all the work that we even now do there through our partners in how we provide infrastructure for our companies and leadership, but also with North America.
Ulf, we will give Jordi the last word. So let's continue with you. What's your assessment, your expectation?
There's not much to add. I think Switzerland, the hub is on a very good trajectory. Indeed, we mentioned precision medicine. I mean, new modalities like cellular therapies, gene therapy. I mean, the first cellular therapies, I mean, that were successful in oncology, CAR T cells were commercialized by a Swiss company. And there's also, I mean, curative gene therapy approaches. And I think this is really where everyone is striving towards in the interest of patients, not to have life-prolonging therapies, but really curative therapies. And especially in the area of oncology, I mean, lots of progress has been done there. And I think the companies, the researchers in Switzerland have been part of that journey.
Thank you, Jordi. You're at the beginning of the emerging companies. You see the trends first of all.
Yes, of course. Let's not forget that to do your research, you need amazing microscopes. You need amazing production facility. Chris alluded to this, the production of these therapies. We're talking cell therapies. As we know today, it's quite complex to produce them and they're expensive. So we see a lot, and I see a lot of trends around developing the technologies that will enable this research, enable analyzing the results, enable producing the therapies at affordable cost, because that will be one of the next challenge.
Jordi, I thank you, and I thank you all the panelists for your engaged discussion, for expressing your views and showing how the Swiss Biotech Hub is operating today and how you see its development in the future. I trust that we have been able to shed some light on the key elements that enable Switzerland to be a leading global life science hub with unique features. Deep roots in science-based innovation with leading universities that had been founded more than 150 years ago, multinational pharma companies that look back on more than 100 years of successful drug development, and more than 1,000 biotech companies that form a powerful external innovation hub, which has become a key driver of innovation. Switzerland is a small country that has compensated its lack of natural resources by investing into education, research and manufacturing infrastructure, and a worldwide network of partnerships. An honest broker that offers international investors, entrepreneurs, and businesses a stable, reliable home base, a closely knit network of high-quality life science specialists, comprising medtech, biotech, and diagnostic companies that can translate emerging technologies into commercial products, scientific breakthroughs into effective therapies, and that allows the Swiss companies to collaborate around the globe. Switzerland is a life science hub in the heart of Europe that welcomes talents, founders, investors from all regions of the world to jointly work to develop the healthcare solutions for current and future needs. In this sense, I would like to close this panel and invite all participants of the WuXi Global Healthcare Forum 2021 to reach out to us and to engage with the Swiss Life Science Hub. Be it to set up or expand your business, to take advantage of the numerous investment opportunities, or to establish a long-term collaboration to apply emerging technologies and new modalities to jointly develop new therapeutic solutions. Thank you very much.